Lisa, so where we left off, and I'm glad we hit record because if I didn't hit record, we'd probably be having a conversation on top of conversation. But you were sharing with me how you had met Steve Gamlin, who's the person that we were able to put together one of the Moments Worth Remembering books for. And then that's when I interrupted you and I said, hey, we got to record, otherwise we'll have multiple conversations. So you met him at Toastmasters, and then that's where we left off.
Yeah, so I had moved to New Hampshire in 2009, and I didn't know a soul. And I knew there was a part of me that wanted to become a public speaker, but I didn't know how. I saw this woman speak, and I was like, "Could you please teach me to do that?" And she was like, "I could charge you a lot of money, or you could come to Toastmasters." So there was a group in Concord, New Hampshire, that met Friday mornings very early at 7 a.m. It had some of the most amazing people I have ever met in that group,
Mm,
and a lot of professional speakers, and Steve was one of them. And one of the things that they were really big on was mentoring, and really about building up the other people around you. And Steve wasn't officially my mentor. We never did that, but he took me on under his wing. And to
mhm,
give you a little background, Steve was a stand-up comedian. Steve is also formerly a morning, radio show host, and um, he has a great sense of humor. And I would watch him in awe when he would get up there in at Toastmasters. And one one thing they were about is always being on time. They
mm,
didn't want you late. And I remember I was late that morning, and I was in the parking lot, and I thought, should I come in or should I go home? Because they were not happy about it. And I said, you know what? I love this group so much. I'm going to go in. So for those of you who don't know what Toastmasters is an organization that helps people learn to public speak. And the
mhm.
first year, you would literally have this book, and every time you speak, there's certain specific things that they want you to learn. Sometimes it's speaking with your hands. Sometimes it's, there's all different topics. And the first thing they do is something called table topics, which is about extemporaneous speaking. So they come up with a topic every week, and then someone will get up and say, Oleg, today the leaves outside in the fall are beautiful. Stand up and in 2 minutes give me your greatest memory of being a child in the leaves. And you have to get up and in 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, express yourself. So I just wanted to give the audience an idea of what
Mhm.
table topics is. So I'm at the door, and Steve is next to the door doing his table topics. I have no idea what the topic is, but as I walk in the door, he puts his arm around me and instantly includes me in his talk. As if we had tried to time it, we couldn't have timed it better. And he blew me away, and how the whole audience just got sucked into it, and no one chastised me for being late because it
Yeah.
ended up being a great gift. But Steve has that way about him of just letting things flow, not letting things get to him, and he has one of the biggest hearts of anyone I know. And I would always watch him, um, really help the homeless veterans, Meals on Wheels. He's the real deal. Like, he
He is.
actually gets out there and does the work and helps people and has this huge heart. And I always looked at him in such deep regard of, wow, I aspire to be someone as loving and caring as he is. And when I first um, joined, I remember what a wreck I was just to do a 7, 8, 9 minutes of introduction. And I would practice in front of the mirror over and over and over and over again. It was terrifying. And then he gave me one of my first opportunities. He was doing this event, and he said, I want you to go and be one of the speakers. I'm like, I've never spoken for 45 minutes in front of a group of people. He took a huge risk on me. he took a huge risk on having me in front of an audience and getting up there and speaking. And I worked so hard on getting my talk together, getting my PowerPoint slides. I had no idea what I was doing. I was scared to death. And I did it, and it was so much fun. And I have no idea how, if I was good or whatever. But what I realized, I got home at 10 o'clock that night, because it was a 12-hour marathon of speakers, that I had a speech at Toastmasters the next day, and I hadn't prepared. So
Mm.
here I had just done 45 minutes, and I had 7 to 10 minutes to prepare for the next day. And I just decided to take a piece of my 45-minute talk, and I was just going to wing it. And I did, and it was probably one of my best talks. So watching him speak in an extemporaneous way gave me the courage to just like, I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to take myself out of my comfort zone, and I'm going to do this. One of the other people in Toastmasters got me an opportunity to speak at McLean Hospital in Boston, and it's one of the most renowned hospitals for mental health in
Mm-hmm.
the country. And they have a group, the Bipolar and Depression Association, and they asked me to come in and speak for an hour. Being a new speaker, there were a number of things that I didn't do. Number one is I didn't find out who my audience was going to be.
Mm.
I just prepared a talk, and I asked Steve to come over and help me prep. And he's like, "Well, you're going to be talking in front of people who are around depressed and bipolar people, so let's add some humor." He gave me a whole bunch of jokes, and so I knew it was really funny. There were moments when we were working together where I was belly laughing with him. And I get to McLean Hospital. There's 100 people in front of me. I hired a videographer to record me so that I would have all this laughter and I would be able to take snippets of this and use it in my marketing. I got up in front of everyone and I started to speak, and there were crickets.
Mm.
I literally used every joke, and as I was going, nothing. And there was a part of me that was waiting for that old-fashioned hook to pull me off
Yeah.
the stage. I was literally like, just speed up and get out of here. And I really, I breathed and I said, just get through this. Just do it. And I finished, and all of a sudden, the whole room lit up with their arms lit up, arms up. And I was so confused. What is going on here? So one by one, they began asking questions. It went on for 20 minutes. And the
Mm.
last person who asked a question or commented said to me, it's really hard when you're depressed and bipolar and on so much medication, you can't feel the high highs and the low lows. I was basically speaking to an entire group of people who were on lithium and heavily medicated.
You probably should have tried it yourself. You might have come up with even newer material. That's really funny. That's a really funny experience, though.
So these are the things that Steve really helped me and taught me and held my hand through. And after that happened, I shared the story with him and we had a big laugh, but he always has this way of letting things roll and
Mm.
flow. And he tells a story of recording himself off in Las Vegas. I think he did this. He jumped off the building
Yes. Yes.
and recorded himself all the way down. And I was like, oh my God. And it was amazing thing to watch. Um, it's one of the things that I truly admire in him is that fearlessness.
Mm-hmm.
And I will always be grateful and love him for what he's given me.
He's one of those people that I'm glad that you shared what you did, because he's had a similar impact in my own life. He's one of those people that not only does he do what he says he's going to do, which is rare, right? And
Right.
this is not a judgment against anyone, but I'm sure you've been in those situations. I certainly have, more times than I can count, where I would say I'm going to do something and then for one reason or another don't end up doing it. Steve's the complete opposite.
Right.
If Steve says he's going to be there, that means driving 2 hours to help support you at a speaking engagement. He's going to be there. If he
Right.
says he's going to go and provide meals for homeless veterans, he's going to do that. Now, the thing that I've always found fascinating about him is he is the type of person who's always willing to give back and always willing to take a chance on other people. And I've been so interested in that because not everyone operates from that perspective, right?
No.
There are only a handful of people that do that. And so I'm wondering, in your case, what do you think he saw in you that you may or may not have been able to see in yourself that said, hey, I'm going to take a chance on her?
You know, I don't really know. That's the
Mm,
thing, is that he just believed in me. Like he always, I don't know, maybe he saw my potential, because I certainly didn't believe in myself at that time. I was terrified.
sure.
Um, I think he saw my potential and I think he saw my heart. And he does that with everyone. And I want to share a story. When I lived in New Hampshire, I was president of the women's the Concord Women's Club. And part of what they did, what they still do, is they own this older home. It's an antique home that houses women in transition. So let's
Mm,
say someone had great difficulty in their life or came from an abusive situation, they could live in this house. They had to pay a small rent, and it was a room, shared bathrooms and everything. And there was a woman who lived there who had cancer and needed to live near the hospital. She didn't have a car, and her name was Eileen, and she just had this amazing smile. And this is a woman who had been through incredible amount of physical abuse from an ex-husband, lost both of her children in two completely different situations. Horrific. I mean, one of those people that you just like, I don't know how she keeps on going, and just had
hmm
recurrence after recurrence of cancer. He was doing an event, and it was a vision board event. And I called him up and I said, I have this woman. I told him her situation. And I said, she doesn't have any money to pay for this event. And he said, just bring her. She began to tell her story that I can't remember the exact thing, but she had won an Oscar. She had lived in the in California, in LA, and was in the movie industry. It was a kind of a behind the scenes type of
hmm
Oscar. And she was very humble and didn't put a lot of emphasis in it. And she used it as her garden decoration.
You're
That's it.
kidding.
It was in the garden, and he loved her story so much. And he was always available to her no matter what. And he would tell her story when he spoke. And he always added humor and always checked in. And I will tell you, I've moved away from I've moved away from Concord. I think it's been 8 years now, a little over 8 years. We don't see each other in person anymore in that Toastmasters group, but he always checks in on me, always. And it's almost like he's psychic in the way where he would just know that I was going through, especially when I was going through a really difficult divorce, because I
Mm,
know he had his own personal experience going
hmm
through divorce. And so
hmm
he would just, hey, Lisa, checking in, see how you're doing. Just want you to know that I'm here for you. And, I've gone to his home. He has his own recording studio, and we recorded some things together. He's got this, amazing recording studio. He just always supported me, um, like this foundation so I could fly, if that makes sense.
He's pretty amazing in that.
Yes.
He's pretty amazing in being able to support other people from a distance or from close. I
Right.
think there's also really something interesting that you mentioned, and that's some people just know. And I don't know how it happens because it happens in my life as well. I'm going through a transition point, and then the person just happens to reach out that same minute, that same exact hour. And it's not like I sent them a text saying, hey,
Right.
this is what's happening. They just know. And it's just been really fascinating to me to know that there's certain people in your life who are willing to take time out of their day, out of their schedule to check in with you, to make sure
Right.
that everything's going well or as well as it could be, add whatever assistance. Steve's definitely been one of those people. It would actually be a really good question of me to ask him, like, where does that come from?
Right.
Is it the people he surrounds himself with? I know he has shared with me a lot of stories around mentors he's had in his own life that probably have imprinted some of this into his own day to day, right? Just how he shows up. But it's really interesting. It certainly is interesting to have people like that. And I'm wondering, having and continuing to have people like Steve in your life, how does that change you? Does that change you? Does that change the way you approach other people? Does it change the way you take chances on others?
Absolutely. And I will say in my own story, which we really haven't talked too much about, is that from the time that I was a child, I had learning disabilities that were
Hmm.
undiagnosed. So in kindergarten, everyone else was reading, writing, doing their math, and I couldn't. So
Hmm.
everyone was so far ahead of me because if you can't read, how are you going to keep up in all of your other subjects?
Correct.
And so I spent every summer of my child in summer school thinking that I wasn't very smart, gave my power away to others, and didn't have a lot of people who believed in me. And there was a speaker that I saw. He wrote the book Coloring Outside the Lines, and I can't recall his name. He was involved in speaking a lot about ADD um, and people who have learning disabilities. And he said something. He said, it just takes one person to believe in you,
Hmm.
and it can't be your parents. It has to be someone outside of that, a neutral party who just
Hmm.
says, I see something in you that can help you in ways. And I remember I had an art teacher like that because I was very creative. I didn't have the ability to memorize large amounts of information. That's not how I learned, and I figured that out much later on in life. But I was very creative, artistic, and I have the ability to think outside the box.
Hmm.
So when I had someone like, like Steve, when I decided to start speaking, what people don't realize is that they think that if they have a gift, they should be perfect at it the first time they do it. Like if you're an
Hmm.
artist or a photographer or whatever you do or a writer, you should be able to just sit down and do it. And I will say that's not the case at all. It can be learned, it has to be crafted, you have to have the desire to work at it. I tried to write a book for 15 years. And as I went through the process, those beliefs that I had in myself about who am I to write a book? What do I
Yes.
have to say that other people haven't said already?
Hmm.
Why would someone read something that I had to say? All of those negative thoughts and beliefs. And what I did was, after 15 years of trying to write, I sat down and wrote a list of all of these limiting beliefs. And this also goes along with what Steve does with the vision board work. It's about going inward and really looking at what you have conscious beliefs, but you also have unconscious beliefs.
Hmm.
And the unconscious beliefs come from either your own personal programming from the time you were a child. And actually, I wrote my book. I finally, once I released all those negative beliefs and I forgave myself. So I forgave myself for all those negative beliefs. And I ended up writing it 2 years, I want to say about 2 years ago, it went bestseller. Actually, a year ago, am I saying? In
That's
every belief
awesome.
is a lie. And if you look at the word belief, lie is in the middle of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to dissect my own beliefs, all the things that I believed in, and release them. And I remember doing the vision board with him, and I put my vision board in the bathroom, and he used to tell the story about me, because I said I looked at it every day. Every morning it was in the perfect place because I'd walk into the bathroom multiple times a day, and I could see that. And I had this particular car that I always thought was really cool, but didn't really think that I'd ever get that particular car. And
Mm.
then 2 years later, my ex-husband bought it for me
No
as a
way.
birthday present. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So the power of your
It's
vision board that
wild.
he talks about is very powerful because we are manifesting beings. Our thoughts and our prayers. Our prayers when we speak are very important. So if you have this belief, I don't want this to happen and I don't want that to happen, what you're actually doing is the universe doesn't understand a negative. So what you're
Correct.
actually doing is saying, I want that. So if you say, I don't want to lose my keys, guess what happens? The
You're
universe
gonna
will
lose your
make you lose your
keys.
keys. And I know that's a silly example, it's just what popped into my head. So you want to be, number one, really careful about what you don't want and focus on what you want instead. And that's how you manifest things. And when you believe really strongly in something, it will happen. Now, he is a walking, talking definition of that. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what he teaches. And
Every
and
day.
it's every day. And I will tell you an example of even taking it to a spiritual level. I was speaking to a friend of mine who lives in Jerusalem, and I was checking in on her about what was going on. And she told me the story about one of the girls who was at the concert when Hamas initially descended upon that concert, and she ran into the bush. And I'm going to paraphrase what this woman said, but basically, she went into the people getting killed, machine gun fire, a lot of terror, and she started to breathe. And so she focused on her breathing and focused on what she wanted and the good. She went into a state of gratitude that in between those breaths, and even though this was going on around her, she could still hear the birds chirping. She was still breathing. She was still alive. And she was so
Mm-hmm.
grateful for that. So in her breath, she was breathing in for 8 counts, holding for 8, exhaling for 8, holding for 4. So in for 8, hold for 4, out for 8, hold for 4. It put her in this trance state that put her into this place of deep gratitude, and she could block out all the sounds around her. She was in the bush for 6 hours in that place, and
Wow.
she was rescued. She was rescued by two Arab Israelis, and she was Jewish, which gave me the chills. And
Wow.
she somehow survived. And she inspired me to check into other situations in wartime when everything is going on around you. And what I did was I researched some things, and there's the Battle of Dunkirk in
Mm-hmm.
Germany, and how there was a call to prayer. Everyone was praying, and basically the story is this part of France, I think it was, that was going to be invaded by the Germans, and they were and everyone prayed, and there weren't enough soldiers and supplies there. And in order to get supplies there, people were literally going across the English Channel in these boats bringing supplies. And somehow Hitler stopped the advancing for like a day, which gave the Allies enough time to get the supplies, people in rowboats. Now, The channel is known for being very choppy and difficult to get across but it was like glass that day. And they won the battle. There's another story during Nagasaki when the atom bomb blew up over Nagasaki. There were two churches where people were praying at that time. Those churches were untouched, and the people inside those churches went on to live their lives, and for 30 years longer. Where if you look at the pictures around them, everything was decimated. So it's not only just your 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 awareness of what you believe at a conscious level. It's also about uncovering what you believe at an unconscious level, and then make it part of your prayer, make it part of your thoughts. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a spiritual aspect, whether you believe in God or not, whatever your religion. This is not about religion. This is about, we are powerful manifesting beings. And this work has changed my life because at the age of 38, I was suicidal. I didn't want to be here. I thought I was worthless. I thought that I didn't have anything to offer. I knew I wasn't going to do anything, but I just needed the pain to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing this work of really investigating my beliefs, my unconscious beliefs, my inherited ancestral belief, there's something called epigenetics, where
Mm-hmm.
we can actually inherit the beliefs of our ancestors. And they did studies with mice at Emory University where they took these mice. The mice were in these cages, and they pumped in this particular odor. And every time they smelled that odor, they would give them these shocks. And they started to associate the smell with the shock. Their grandpups, whenever they smelled that smell, would run. So it doesn't change your DNA, it changes the way your DNA is expressed.
Mm.
So they found that people whose grandparents, going back, I've worked with people going up to 9 generations back, of clearing through the DNA and healing that, because those thoughts, those beliefs can run us unconsciously, and you can do all the talk therapy you want, but you are not going to access it from talk therapy from the conscious mind. It's all buried in the unconscious. And that is some of the most powerful work that you can do.
Mm. This is probably the best testimonial or whatever else that I think I've ever been a part of putting together for Steve Gamlin. Now, it's funny to even think about these conversations, and like I mentioned to you earlier, I've just started this as an opportunity to not only further express and explain the impact these people make in our lives, but also to be able to make these conversations available to the public, because I think there's so much more that we can learn from one another in any given circumstance. And as you were sharing all of this, so much comes to mind. I'm like, man, this has got to be the best possible way you can paint a picture about a person that is significantly more than a post on LinkedIn or on
Right.
Facebook or wherever. It's like, this is like really what life is about, right? It's these people that come into our lives, these people that have an impact. And how often, this has certainly been true in my own life, and I don't know if this is true in yours, did I not take the time to express it? Did I dismiss it? Did I take it for granted? Did I think that, oh, they must know the impact that they have had? And really, at the end of the day, what I've learned is that they don't. That's the ultimate truth.
Right.
People
Right.
don't know.
And how many times do you get a call that someone has died
Yes,
and you're like, I never got to say
I wish I would have
what
said
I
this.
yes. And I mean, could I go through really a list of people that I know throughout my entire life and make a point to call every single one of them? I mean, I could, but it takes a lot of time and energy. And I will tell you that this is kind of what Steve does. I
Yeah.
feel like he almost has this list that he just, checks in. He may not always say how he feels, but through his actions of saying, "Hey, just checking in. You don't have to call me back. Just wanted to let you know I'm thinking about you." Sometimes he'll just even do that. And he always seems to know when you need that. And it's such a beautiful thing when someone just stops to think about you and know, wow, someone just took time and effort out of their day. It's interesting. It's a very humbling experience.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because even just this week, I was laughing because I'm working with someone to help me with my branding. And there's a website where you put out to bid
Yes.
your ideas of what you want, and they come back, and they only get paid if they win the bid. And I was so humbled at one point because I said, there were 200 people working on my logo. And only one of them is going to get paid for it. And it was overwhelming to me to think that that many people were focusing on my name, my ideas, where I'm
Hmm.
going. And so it just kind of brings me back to Steve, that he has the bandwidth to think about other people. And there's something that I'm involved in called the Why Institute, and it helps people better understand their their how, their what. And what
Hmm.
people most people don't understand, if you ask someone, why are you here, what is your purpose, right? Most people will say, oh, it's my spouse, it's my children, it's, this or that. It's something that they're motivated about. And what I say is, you've had that why your entire life. And one of the whys is contribute. And I will guarantee, I have not done Steve's why, but it's a 10-minute test that you take. But from what I see about him, he is contribute. And these are the
Oh yeah.
people whose priorities are about lifting others up. They tend to not want to be the center of attention. They're all about lifting other people up and making them the center of attention. And he's a perfect example of that. And where and all of these people talking about him and what you're doing, what people need to understand is, when someone, there's the love languages.
Yes.
People love others the way they want to be loved back.
Hmm.
And what you are doing makes me emotional because it's the way he loves being brought back to him. It's the mirror being shown back to him. And I don't know that anyone has ever gone to this degree of matching what he has done for others. Does this make sense?
It does.
Like the memory book and all of these
And
things.
probably aren't.
Right.
I'm about to shed tears myself.
Right? Is that when some people are acts of service, where they're always doing for others,
Yes.
and if they're coming back to me, there may be physical touch. So they're touching, they want to hold my hand, and I want, it would love my love language, maybe acts of service. So we tend to be off because we see the world through certain eyes, and we think everyone is going to love us the same way. So
Hmm.
what I say to people is, look at the way other people demonstrate back to you. Like when my ex-husband would run around and take care of my car, and he would change the oil, and he would make sure there was windshield wiper fluid, and I was like, I just thought he liked to do that. I'd never thought of that as an act of love.
Hmm.
That was his love language. So when you see someone like Steve who's doing this now, people who have that contribute as their why give and give and give, and often will empty themselves where
Yes.
there's nothing left. And so it's very important to help them fill their cup back up. They have to learn to do it themselves without draining themselves. So it's not up to us to do it for them, but it's also important to give love back to them the way that they love, because that's how they feel loved. Otherwise, if you don't feel loved, you're going to keep feeling abandoned. You feel sad that no one loves you. Meanwhile, all these people are actually doing it through their own way of love, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think Steve is a perfect example of that. Steve is someone not only has done that, but continues to do it for so many people. And I also think to some degree, people receive all these things in different ways, right? Just like you mentioned.
Right.
Some
Right.
people are not even necessarily better or worse, they're just different in the way they receive
Right.
compliments, love, appreciation from other people. But I just kind of figured, why not? We're all alive at this moment. We're able to do this. So why not go one
Right.
extra step and express this to other people's lives
Right.
and put a smile on their face or make them cry or whatever the emotion is? Because that's the thing, I think to some degree, we're all seeking that in one form or another at
Right.
the end of the day. So why not just actually do it and
Right.
make someone else's Monday or Tuesday or whatever the day is? I'm a
Right.
huge believer in making these moments for every day. Like that's my ultimate goal, I think, is to not have it be celebrated on only specific holidays or birthdays or any of these occasions, but make every day a special occasion. Why
Right.
can't the Wednesday be something that is extraordinary for you to experience? So Steve is a perfect example of that, and obviously, I know you and I can have this conversation for hours upon end. But
Right.
for anyone that's going to be listening and watching this, what are some ways that people can connect with you? What do you have going on? Where can people find the book? Uh,
Right.
Anything that you have in your life that people can be a part of?
Well, thank you. My book is on Amazon. It's a bestseller in Every Belief is a Lie.
Mm,
And it really helps people better understand their programming and how to recognize it. And I give tools and techniques to release that. I can be reached through my website, Lisa Schermerhorn Coaching, Schermerhorn, because people struggle with my last name. I'm working on changing that to make it easier for people. But Lisa Schermerhorn Coaching, and I also I do free consultation if people want to know their why, because
mm,
it's their why operating system. It changed my life. I found out that I'm challenged, and I challenge conventional thinking and think outside the box. And when you're that way, people will bully you and they don't understand you. And that is another thing about Steve, is he
mhm,
doesn't judge. Like, he
mhm,
didn't judge me. He honored my process and who I am, and gave me the honor of just being me and being authentic. And that's the gift that I like to help other people with. You can reach me through my email at Lisa Schermerhorn and the number one at Gmail as well. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook as well, and Instagram. And so thank you so much, Oleg, for allowing me to talk about Steve, someone who's very near and dear to my heart. And it also, you inspire me to really think about all the other people who are important in my life. And I need to reach out and just say thank you and let them know how much I appreciate them.